Hello, everyone. This is your most exciting left-wing Eastern European show, and my name is Bojan Stanislavski. With me, as usual, is Maria Czerna, the co-host of our show, and our special guest, Małgorzata Kulbaczewska-Figat. She is a Polish journalist and an activist and a researcher. Welcome to the program, both of you.
Hello.
Hello, thanks for having us.
So today we're gonna discuss, one of my favorite topics. That's probably because of my localization. I'm based in Poland, and we're gonna start off exactly with discussing the situation here. So, Małgorzata, I want to hear your take on what happened a couple of days ago. It was described widely in the international media as a strike, okay?
Yes.
And I'm kind of confused about it, because normally people associate the notion of strike with workers refusing to work. And this time around, it actually happened so that we witnessed something like a strike of major media capitalists in Poland. So I think we're, opening yet another chapter in this, multitude of absurd situations that Law and Justice, the Polish Catholic right-wing fundamentalist party, kind of, arranged for. And tell us, Małgorzata, how shocking it was for you to be confronted with this strike that everybody was so shaken about.
Oh, well, so basically, you are absolutely right when you say that strike is a workers' action, but I guess that in Poland already for a while, we tend to confuse words. We need to change their meaning. And with the word strike, it is yet another case, because when somebody in Poland tries to show that his or her protest is very strong, very important, and the government must take it into account, then the word strike comes into use. The same came with the female strike. Yes, the all Poland women's strike that in fact was no classical strike at all, but a series of street events, more or less successful. But going back to the newest media issue, I was shocked indeed when I opened in the morning the website of one of top Polish media players, a liberal medium, and I read there that, with a new tax, they are on the verge of collapse, and this would be the end of democracy in Poland, because there will be no more free media, and no more free media means no more debate, and no debate means no democracy, of course. And then I decided to read more. How much will they be taxed if they are afraid of collapse? And then I read that, in fact, the taxation is about only the highest revenues, the absolutely highest sums that most of Polish media and journalists have never seen in their lives. Let me just say that how much is what the advertisement would be taxed. So it would be just a few percent from the sums over 15 million per year if printed media was supposed to be taxed. And in the case of digital media, it would be like you would need 750 billions of revenue in global scale, including 5 million in Poland, to be touched with this new taxation at all. You know, this is absolutely incredible that the liberal media claimed that now small regional radio stations, some small portals, some alternative sources of information are gonna start collapsing when, you know, these sums of advertisement I have never seen such money.
Yeah.
The medium I have been working for, any of the media I worked for, has never seen such sums from advertisement. And I guess that most of media in Poland have never reached these sums.
Okay,
So
let's
Right.
get
But
this-
before we continue, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say to just describe the context a little bit for our viewers, because what we're talking about here, the strike was the so-called strike. Okay, was provoked by a suggestion put forward by the Polish government that they're going to tax the ad revenues, okay, of the biggest media players. And Małgorzata is right that when it comes to printed media, we're talking about sums like 15 million zlotys, which is, I don't know, like between 3 and 4 million euros a year, okay. And they would pay something between 2 and 10%, like depending on the type of the media and the type of the ads and so on and so forth. So we're really talking about taxing, potentially taxing, because I don't think it's even gonna get to the point where it's going to be voted on in the parliament. But the suggestion is that it would be a small tax on the biggest media players in Poland. All right. And this provoked this not unprecedented, actually precedented. I mean, we get this every once in a while, but maybe unprecedented in terms of like global reactions to events like that. It just provoked a super hysterical attitude, and it made all those who are unfavorable to the government, I mean, not all of them, but many of those who just don't like the current government in Poland, to claim that it's the end of democracy, it's the end of free speech, and so on and so forth. And, I want to go to you, Maria, now, and I want to ask you, because you're a specialist in media culture and advertising and stuff like that. I mean, how much, although it's a psychological question, really, but it does bear a relation to your profession, how much out of your mind you have to be in order to claim that the advertising industry secures free speech?
Well, you have to be a true believer in the free market orthodoxy, that I can tell. And I can tell that I was such a believer, but I was in the 5th grade. I have that to say in my defense. And when I became, a worker like everybody else, I started to realize that this orthodoxy is nothing more than a fantasy, and the only thing that trickles down from the rich to the poor are the tricks in terms of evading taxes. But, the narrative was something like that. The media, because you have two theories here, and two main ideas in media theory, and ever since researchers started to write about it. The first one, the media was conceived and thought about like it was a public service. And this is why we have, especially in Romania, a very good national radio that was budgeted and that was financed directly by us, the citizens. It had a special tax and everybody had to pay it, and it was great because they knew exactly how much money they were going to get. And this is the case also for the national television. Romanian national television, who is functioning like a public service. They think information is a public service. Okay, this is the first, let's say, school of thought. Now, this is also present in France or, in Great Britain. The BBC is also a public service. Not many people know they like the BBC, but they do not know that they are a public institution.
Now, sponsored by the government, like the Russian TV.
Yes, but here we have to make a distinction, because you know what happened I think it was 2017, when this perspective changed, and from a public institution it became a governmental institution. And let me explain how. Because first you had this tax that you had to pay in order to get this information, okay? So they knew exactly how much money they are going to get from us. But then the government came with the idea of abolishing this tax and package it as a very nice reform. And now the government say how much money they are going to get. So the government is actually financing these two institutions and one press agency that we have, you know. And this is how you go from the institution of the public, or one way to go from the institution of the public to the institution of the government, because the government can now decide they are going to pay less, you know. Before this regulation, they knew exactly how much money they can count on, and that gave them autonomy in a way. Now, in the United States, they always thought right from the beginning that information is a commodity, you know, and they function according to this idea that there is no such thing as a media as a public service, and that information is a commodity. And just an anecdote, the objectivity of the press has also an interesting idea. During the 19th century, nobody thought about the objectivity of the press. And it was somehow invented in the United States as a pressure from the free market. And let me explain why. The first news agencies started to form. I don't know if you knew this, but the news agencies started to form, and they needed objective information so they could sell it to all the media outlets from all the ideological spectrum. And this was the first idea of objective news, and this is how objectivity became profitable. Now, they saw at the beginning of the 20th century, the idea of objectivity fell, and it was replaced by the idea of pluralism of opinions. And this is why you have now in the United States, when you watch CNN or whatever, like split screens. They have this idea that they have to have representatives, or they used to have this idea before the soaring polarization that you're seeing right now. They have this idea that they have to have representatives from both sides, you know. So this was also a way to avoid responsibility, you know, just to make people fight and then the viewers to decide, and they could hide behind this to not take any responsibility for what was discussed in the show. So this is basically, you know, the media theory regarding ways of financing the media in a nutshell. Now, what happened with the advertising companies was that it totally perverted the idea of objectivity. First, you know, the journalists had a social standing and they had some independence, but as advertising companies got bigger and bigger, and as corporate media became more and more important, just think about that in the United States, I'm pretty sure you don't know that, but in 1980, there were 53 media companies that own like 90% of all the media, okay, all the market. Now, do you know how many of them are still left? Like 6. Like 6 CEOs decide what the 200 million Americans are going to see, you know? Just think about this, how corporate media became more and more concentrated. And as this happened, it was more and more difficult to write about certain topics. And there are huge discussions, and there were discussions starting from the 90s. For instance, Roberta Baskin wrote about Nike treating very poorly the workers for the CBS, and then she was basically forced to resign a half a year later. And then she saw that the news were about the Olympics were being relayed by some people that had, jackets with the Nike logo, because they were basically um, selling so much advertising to this media outlet that was an important one. It was not some, small media outlet somewhere in Nevada. It was the CBS, and they were not able to report again on the working conditions on Vietnam Nike's factory, for instance. And there are plenty of examples like that, plenty of examples. Even here in Romania in 2011, we had a site, Think Outside the Box, that published an article. It was when Coca-Cola celebrated 125 years, and it was very critical of the Coca-Cola, and there were doctors saying that it is not healthy. And the head of the advertising company here, Leo Burnett, the representative here in Romania, I don't know if it was Leo Burnett or some other advertising company, wrote to the main site, Adevărul, truth.Romania, and told them that if you don't sever your link to this site, we are no longer giving you any money for advertising for Coca-Cola because we are handling their account here in Romania.
Right.
That link. I mean, how can you think, that advertising is the way to freedom? And I want to say another thing, and then I'll shut up. I have many things to say about this, but we think that the media are free, but they are not, because the advertising is sponsoring them. And when you buy this mug, you can be sure that the advertising that was being made for that, you are paying for. So you are paying for the media, but it's so perverse and nobody thinks about it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this thorough explanation, I really feel that there's something deeply troubling about people who buy into this idea that advertising, which essentially is an industry that is supposed to make people do things that they normally wouldn't do had it not been for the massive advertising, that it somehow secures free speech, or it secures free media. And all these examples that you put forward, I think they are they are kind of the manifestation of the pathology, of the contrary to the claims that are being made by the Polish opposition media platforms, who are just doing this kind of I don't even know how to exactly call this, because I think gaslighting, that would be the term. I mean, they make people think that something is happening and threatening them, which is completely not the case. So they are just gaslighting the entire public opinion in Poland. And in fact, what they are doing is they are defending their own economic interests. And of course, having said all this, I don't trust the Polish government. I hate the Polish government. I hate it pretty much the level of hatred of my level of hatred is pretty much the same as those that are journalists or publishers of these opposition media platforms. But I want to be intellectually and politically honest. Those guys, the Polish government, are suggesting something that is in place as a taxation mechanism in France, in Czech Republic, in many other countries, in Spain, many other countries in Europe, and of course in Hungary, which this is what they spinned the hysteria around, because in Hungary, the government, ideologically speaking, is pretty similar to the Polish one. despite there's less religion there. But Viktor Orban, the Hungarian prime minister, he really managed to crush the opposition media. And now the Polish media are also losing the battle, okay, for the for influence, okay, for being able to make an impact on the public opinion. And of course, I agree that this is not an even battle, because the Polish government has taken over completely and totally the entire apparatus of the so-called public media, which became governmental media, really, pretty much like in Romania, although without any official regulations. It just happened. Okay. Yeah. So this is very troubling, mostly because it's yet another chapter in the Polish hysteria. And unfortunately, in Poland, we cannot have a rational discussion about it. And I think that unfortunately, and I want you, Małgorzata, to comment on this, unfortunately, the left, or at least a large part of the left, followed this hysterical approach and attitude. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I think that's exactly what the Polish government wanted to happen. Okay, they wanted to see again everybody who is against them, that is against the Polish government, at each other's throats, insulting each other and quarreling over a measure that is, as I said previously, unlikely to even be voted on in the parliament. What's your take?
It is absolutely unlikely to be voted in the parliament. That is, yes, there are here we need to say that there are disagreements over this idea, over this law, even within the ruling right-wing coalition. So it is very likely that the topic was just, thrown to the opposition to see them and fighting, and to see them hysterizing and mobilizing, and then show to the people that the government is struggling with the pandemics and the opposition is involved in something else again. But here I wanted to underline one important thing that is very important, I think, to understand the whole point of the debate. The so-called free media, so I'd say rather the opposition media, claimed that with the new taxation, there will be no more debate, there will be no more free speech, and there will be no more courageous and independently thinking journalists because, their posts will disappear. What is the truth is that actually even today we don't have free, independently thinking media, apart from some very opposition outlets like the one that I am proud of working for. The corporate media that were on the forefront on the protests played a very negative role in the very development of public debate in Poland over the last 30 years. I wouldn't even hesitate to say that they killed the proper political debate in Poland, because what they published over the years was neoliberal propaganda, was the propaganda in the service of the biggest neoliberal parties like Civic Platform in Poland. They did not allow dissident voices to be heard, and even when sometimes they published reports on social issues or where they supported striking teachers last year, they did 2 years ago, basically. Most of that was done within the frame of their political agenda, that was to support neoliberals, the pro-Europeans, the pro-austerity parties against any political alternative, be it from the left or from the right. And when they say that with the new taxation, the debate will be killed in Poland, the debate is dead, half dead. For years already. And the only places that actually offer some alternative, as I said, are really small outlets, which are attacked by both right-wing public media and these free media corporate, big groups like Gazeta Wyborcza. And yes, and this is perhaps the most awful in all this hysteria that was started by Gazeta Wyborcza and other big outlets, that they made us believe that it will be now when the independent journalist will die and Polish citizens will lose their chance to get to get good quality journalism. There is hardly any good quality journalism in Poland for years. And second thing I wanted to mention is that these big corporate media that stood on the forefront of the so-called strike, they are among the worst employers in Poland in terms of working conditions they offer. There are no more stable working contracts for journalists in this big private media financed among other by advertising. You can even check out for job offers that they published just a day after strike. They were looking for full-time journalists employed according to a flexible contract. You know, a flexible contract with no guarantees for somebody who was supposed to run social media profiles, prepare videos, also to participate in some press conferences. So, you know, a typical journalist job paid as little as it is possible and with as little guarantee for the worker as it is possible. And well, nobody will persuade me that people who are not paid and employed properly are going to involved in highest quality investigative journalism or highest quality reporting or whatever. Because I know how is it to work for little money in the media. You just don't have motivation, and you can't really blame such worker for not having a motivation. So no, they are corporations and not a center of independent thinking. And I'm saying all that with kind of grief, because on the other hand, I agree with you, Bojan, that the Polish government is not something that we can trust, not an institution whose actions we may approve of. And we have to say that in this taxation project, they also explained to what aims are they going to spend the extra money gained on taxation. And while 50% was supposed to be spent on public healthcare, which is very good idea for modern times, and 15% was to go to preserving cultural heritage, the remaining 35% was supposed to be spent on, well, they called it like more good quality Polish content in the media. I stress the word Polish, which basically means that they were supposed to, they wanted to give this money to their own right-wing media outlets to open new right-wing platforms and to produce even more poisonous, ultra-patriotic, ultra-Catholic content that we are all fed off in Poland already. So, like, what we had was the confrontation of the corporate media, which are, as Maria brilliantly pointed out, there are no way to freedom, there are no way to good quality public debate, and a right-wing government who just looks for ways to get money for their projects and their propaganda. And you mentioned Polish left, who was mainly in its most unable to take an independent stand. And well, this is tragic, because we could have, I say we, because I still consider myself part of Polish left, we could have
it's increasingly
pointed out,
difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
So the Polish left could have pointed it all out, that we don't build quality journalism with low-paid journalists, that we can't rely on big business if we want to create a quality public debate, including, well, look, for example, the Polish left should have asked, how can we demand from a big business to finance, for instance, a huge debate on how the world after the pandemic would look like? How can we democratize the public life in Poland when the right-wing conservatives are finally not in power, which will happen one day, I hope. So how can we even expect that big businesses would like to finance such questions? Well, we can see what the big business is keen to invest in. We all know that these private media are spending the vast amounts of money in producing low quality programs and really low quality content. And how was it supposed to change now?
Yeah, thanks. I couldn't agree more, really, because for me, I'm a person that is something like, I'm a political junkie. I'm a news junkie. I follow the events and the comments and the interpretations and the analysis all the time. And in order to maintain some hygiene, despite the fact that I'm based in Poland, I'm just trying to avoid as much as possible the Polish media. So for me, this strike was no problem because I barely noticed it, okay? Because I just don't go there. I go there only if I have to. So let's just talk for a short while. And Maria, I'd like to ask this question. I'd like to ask you this question. How do you think, in circumstances like this, where we don't really have anything like free media, we have corporate media that reflect different political interests, okay, depending on which political entity they are closer to, they are more friendly to, and so on and so forth. And of course, it depends on who advertises where and stuff like that, totally. But then what do you think should be the approach of the left? Because my take would be that we definitely need media. We definitely should, defend the idea of having a public broadcaster, okay, that's going to be as, that's going to be free from direct, at least, okay, interference from the government or from some political forces. But we also should have our own media. Okay, and I think that this is the problem of the left in Poland, and not only in Poland, but this is why they reacted the way they did. They just went ahead, full steam, in full support of this strike, okay, quote unquote, because they don't have their own media. Okay, so they have to rely on some platforms, hoping that they could be friendly to them in some circumstances. Okay. They don't have any independence in terms of their media life, in terms of their media representation. They can only count on the right wing to let them in occasionally, okay? Which, again, shows the subordination of the left, its capitulation, its lack of understanding of the importance of having a media outlet, and so on and so forth. Like, tell me, what do you think the left in general, okay, in a situation like that, should propose, should put forward?
Well, in my opinion, we have to have a serious debate on the idea of free media and what does it mean. We had a pretty nasty comment on the barricade today. Somebody said that we are a political organization. We are not informing people. Why is that? Because people are so used to this neoliberal orthodoxy that they don't see it anymore. They see it as news. It is very difficult, and in a way, maybe I could understand the Polish left, because it's very difficult when you have a public that is so used to these ideas that they react like the fish in the ocean. One fish says to the other, look, the water is salty, and the other ones go like, what water? Because they are used to it. They stay there so much that they think that all that happens in the mainstream is information. And when you have a critical stance against neoliberalism, capitalism, you are political. You are not, how should I say, professional enough. Because they managed, before answering to your question, we have to talk about the enemy. Now, the enemy, and what they did was to define professionalism as a way to defend capitalism. So journalistic objectivity is the one that tells people things from the neoliberal perspective, unfortunately. Now, what should the left do? Of course, they should go for independent media platforms. But you see, of course, there are a lot of people, and especially here in Romania, we had an independent media platform in 2012, and they managed to somehow destroy it because somebody came to power there as the chief editor, or I don't know, because the power structure was not, I don't know, accessible, transparent enough. There was not enough transparency. And they started, measuring people, who's leftist, who's not, he's not a true leftist, and they basically destroyed it. This is the way to go. Then what happened here was that a major media outlet that started to pay, and to pay well, saw an opportunity to have these intellectuals under their wing, and they started paying. But this is not entirely independence, because they work for corporate media, as you say. And I'm pretty sure that had it been a case that this media platform would be attacked by the government with some threatening measures like that, they would be on their side, even though they are corporate media, because we can't seem to find a common voice and enough serious people willing to devote their careers and enough of their time and energy to this type of project, unfortunately. And we live another thing. We live in this capitalist society that everybody's for, on their own. And they look for opportunities to get higher salaries and more visibility and more, respectability, because they play into the game of this type of oppressive system that is the corporate media and the neoliberal politics, unfortunately. Of course, the leftists should have the courage to say we are leftists, because I interviewed yesterday a brilliant politician that had tremendous energy and wonderful initiatives, especially in terms of fighting gender violence. But she was afraid to say that she's leftist, she's afraid to say that in public. Well, until we find enough people to get over it and to stop playing along the rules that are being set by the elites, we are left to decide, to debate here these problems, and hope that in the end enough leftists would join what we are doing here. And maybe not our, but let them make their own platform. But I would like to see more courageous people saying, I am leftist, okay, I am socialist. Because as I told you, like here in Romania, I don't know what's the situation in Poland, but here if you say that you're socialist, it's like you're saying that you have STD or something, is a stigma, okay? And, work together in a common project, in a common media project, because like it or not, now we may not like these social media platforms, but still they offer the opportunity of having an independent voice from the corporate media, and they would also have to start criticizing this way of financing the media. Because you see, you have these two possibilities: public information model for the information or commodity model for the information. These two ways of thinking about information. Both of them have their pitfalls and their disadvantages. Like the public information, like we see in Romania, has to deal with political pressures, high political pressures, because they, the politicians who rule the country want to influence the editorial agenda, okay? And then when you have advertising paying for the media, then you have economic pressures. I mean, this is pure logic. If, let's say, we accept directly advertising from a major brand, whatever, Starbucks, Coca-Cola, whatever, it doesn't matter. How can we write critically about them? Because we are biting the hand that's feeding us.
Yeah.
How can this be a model for independent media?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly my position here. I mean, you got to be out of your mind all the time to claim that advertising has to do in even remotely, okay, with free press, free speech, and so on and so forth. But you see,
I want to say another thing here. Now, they are very, perverse, and they are able to produce the image of the free media. They are excellent in doing that, because they say, look, but you just you turn on the TV and you have 300 possibilities to choose from. Yes, but none of them criticizes capitalism.
Yeah, exactly.
Davis that wrote a book, I think it was in 2011, and he did a research. But he did a research on top media institution in Great Britain. That is the Fleet Street Press, that it's called like that because they had their headquarters on this street. So mainstream media, British mainstream media, and he found more occurrences of the word crap than of the word capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
During 3 decades. So basically, they create this appearance because they have huge quantity of information, but very low quality, and they all sing the same song.
That's exactly the case.
And that applies also to the digital media, because they are called alternative media. Well, if they don't provide an alternative and a criticism to the current system, they are not alternative. Okay? They are the same thing to a different channel.
That's right. Also, I think what is particularly important here is that, the question of, everything you said pretty much speaks to the fact that we need a debate, and globally, really, not only in Poland or in Romania or in Eastern Europe, we globally need a debate about the future of the media and the role of the media and the models that should be or could be applied, and so on and so forth. And I think that this suggestion by the Polish government could have been used for this kind, for beginning at least, all right, this kind of debate. And we cannot have it. And it doesn't seem like anyone, unfortunately, including the left, is interested in any way of having this debate. And now, why? And this is the question to you, Małgorzata, because I think that unfortunately, the Polish left, and pretty much like the Eastern European, like the rest of the Eastern European left, they don't really have any alternative idea. Okay, they don't have a program for democratization of the media. They don't have a program for commercialization of the media. They don't have a program for decommodification of information, and so on and so forth. What they want, most of them, okay, is not really anything political, but they want, basing themselves exactly on this liberal paradigm that, objectivity, pluralism, different sources of information, choice, okay. And I think Maria put it very well. In a liberal democrat, in a perfect liberal democratic society, you can have you can go ahead and make your choice, right? You can buy any paper that you like, you can turn on any TV program that you like, you can listen to any radio station that you like, and you have the right to make your choice, only you don't have the right to stay informed. That's the problem.
Yeah.
What do you think, Małgorzata?
Well, I think that the left in Poland, and not only in Poland, is forgetting one very important lesson from our own leftist past. That is, in the past, every left-wing party tried to have its own had an own newspaper, and even more of them if the time was particularly revolutionary. And it was obvious for everybody in the party that this publication needs to be supported by the party members, that it needs to be financed from fundraising among the party members and sympathizers, and that it really must be done, because it is impossible for left-wingers to rely on right-wing media outlets to report on what we do. And I think that this idea can be easily revived in our times, even if we need to update it in modern conditions. Well, Maria is right that many of our readers is reacting differently to an politically oriented media outlet, and because the idea of objective media, of non-partisan media, is so deeply rooted in people's minds. So let's organize a few media outlets. Let one of them be strongly, openly socialist, strongly red, let's say, and the other ones could not focus on the symbols, but rather just inform about everyday issues. Talk about housing, like public healthcare, social information, local info. And so that to show different perspective, even without naming it straightforwardly socialist, just to show that we can see the same phenomena from a different angle. And people who first read this not 100% politicized news may then realize that what right-wing offers to them is not what they are looking for, and then turn also to the more openly political outlets. So there are many ideas to think how we create our own media environment. It is something that Polish right-wing, a lesson that Polish right-wing learned excellently a few years ago. They opened not one big outlet, but a whole group of them, and a range from really the worst kind tabloids to newspapers that are really serious places with conservative authors debating each other. And that is something that we should try to do. And secondly, what the left-wingers should underline is that the only way for us to have good quality left-wing media is to have them financed independently, so that there is no other way for us than to get our media financed by the readers, as perhaps by mass fundraising, and to be in touch with the readers, so that they at one point that they become co-authors of this media. So left-wing platforms should be as democratic as they can. So we should be in constant touch with our readers. We should listen to their proposals, what they want to be discussed, what they want we should publish their voices as much as it is possible. We should talk to them, listen to them, learn from them, and also try to share our experience with them. This is the model that only we, the democratically thinking socialists, we can develop, because this is a vision completely different from what the right-wing platforms and the liberal ones can offer. But
yeah, thanks.
We must bear no illusions. No right-wing media will give us the proper platform. We must organize, and we must rely on our forces. And as the history teaches us, our forces are not so little, even if we start from nothing.
Yeah, but we have to start, right? Like we have to start
Yes.
at least thinking about it. And this is the major problem, because I don't see the political will on the part of the, for lack of better formulation, I'm just going to call them the establishment left. Okay. I mean, I'm talking about the left that is present in the parliament and so on and so forth. You know, they never, I mean, I can't remember the time when they actually invested a lot in some kind of media platform in Poland that they would maintain, they would sustain. No, I mean, they had something that they inherited from the People's Republic, and then they finally dumped it, right? So eventually, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, something like that. And since then, they just relied on what is now largely referred to as the liberal media, although it's just conservative media, a little less conservative than those that are favorable to law and justice.
I would even say it is even worse, because the left wing is pretending to be interested in media questions. The establishment left is often complaining about lack of left-wing media, but when it goes to practice, they finance the few existing platforms with really funny sums. Really some ridiculous money. Actually, in a few years ago, after when the Social Democrats got into parliament after a 5-year break, they were asked by a group of left-wing thinking journalists and editors, can we count on support from them in some form? And basically the answer we heard was that let the left-wing media develop, and we keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah. That's just, but that exactly shows the kind of attitude they have, the attitude they have towards politics and towards the media and towards the people who support them. Okay, their base. And I want to say I totally agree with Małgorzata on the question of, on the question of the grassroots funding, because I'm afraid I'm just. The only way to go for really independent media, that is media, and that speaks to what Maria said. That is the media that challenge, that confront the dominating narratives, is that they finance themselves. So either through collecting money from the readers, from those that are supportive of those platforms, or by running their own business that is going to be able to secure some revenue that could be transferred over to people that are going to do this purely journalistic work. Okay, so this is the way to go, and for us, this is also the situation. I mean, we are the kind of independent media, and we can only count on ourselves. And I just don't understand why are those who are the biggest media players in Poland suddenly feel threatened, okay? And they're gonna go bust. They're gonna disappear because of some taxation. If I were to be taxed by anyone, okay, on advertising revenues, I would just say that's going to be my least the least of all my problems, okay, because I've got so many other problems, okay, like censorship in the internet, censorship on social media. I've got financing, basically the fundamental financing problem which all small outlets have, right? So they can sell their papers, they can have advertising budgets of sizes of millions of zlotys, millions of euros and stuff like that, and yet they are complaining. So my message to them would be, as much as I hate the government that puts forward this proposal, how about you just do what you preach, and you preach that free market is fantastic. Free market helps everyone. Free market is the tool that is going to guarantee all those people who have something interesting and something meaningful to offer a success. So be a better media, okay? If you think that the market is going to solve the things for you, be a better media. Make more people buy your papers. Make more people pay whatever, some kind of subs, okay, or support you with money. So while I'm against the Polish government, and I feel that a regulation like this, if it was to be enacted, actually could have been misused, probably to repress to some extent the opposition media, because I understand the mentality of the currently ruling elite. Okay, but I don't feel sorry for them, and I just don't understand why the left would have to take part in this festival, where what we observe essentially is a conflict between two right-wing rivalry camps. Okay, and we as the left, we're so weak, that we cannot even recognize this. It's just two right-wingers. Two right-wing camps fighting each other. And instead of, at least maintaining some autonomy and not pay attention to this, we are so eager to take part in this war between one right wing and another right wing faction on the side of one of them. And how do you make this political choice? Which side are you going to be on? I just don't get it. Like, where is your political thinking? Where is your intellectual and political independence? And I'm really talking about basic stuff here, okay? Basic things. You don't have to be a communist or an educated socialist activist, okay, in order to come down to these conclusions, right? It's enough to have some kind of minimum critical thinking. Like, you see someone offering a tax or suggesting a tax on ad revenues, you don't go crying, okay, that now it's the end of democracy, it's the end of free speech, it's the end of everything. Because if you have a pinch of sanity in your head, you know that advertising is something that, if it plays a role, and it does, in the media landscape, it plays a role which is exactly contrary to, you know, free speech and I know myself, okay, I've worked with and in media or in various media projects for the last, I don't know, 15 years or something like that, right? And I got to tell you, I personally know at least a dozen of stories, okay, that were suppressed, good journalism that was suppressed because of the potential perspective of losing advertising revenue on the part of the publishing organization that the journalists were, you know, working for. And everybody knows that. I mean, it's such a common knowledge. All right, like people don't think about it every day, but when you just go out in the street and ask someone, do you think that people that advertise in certain papers can influence the content of the paper or of whatever media outlet? Nine out of 10 are going to say, of course, yeah, you know. And yet, you know, we cannot count on even this kind of elementary logic, you know, from the part we cannot expect that of the left leaders in Poland. And this is just something that I cannot wrap my head around. And I'm wondering, Maria, do you think it's all just because there's this general concept that professionalism means succumbing to the dominating narrative? Is this so strong as a sentiment that people that are active politicians cannot depart from this, detach themselves from this concept?
No, they can't, unfortunately. And you said something I do not agree with. You said that you don't have to be an educated socialist to take these decisions. Oh, but you have to. I mean, the lack of intellectual exercise is the one thing that makes these people, you know, jump from the camp of the conservatives to the camp of the liberals and not have their own voice. I was shocked to see how smart this politician that I interviewed was in terms of knowing how public administration works and how ignorant she was in terms of ideology. You know, it was striking for me because she was, it seems like we lost for a minute Margojata.
Right.
She's actually brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But when it comes to political ideology, and this is part of the problem, you know, you have to be an educated socialist, unfortunately, to take this stance and to be aware that, look, you see, this is a power game. And they're in power, I mean, the neoliberal elites, and they define what professionalism in journalism means. And you have to oppose it in order to have, hi, you came back, Margojata. You have to have the courage and the intellectual, you know, tools to fight it. Now, critical thinking. Even though I teach critical thinking, I have a PhD in critical thinking. I don't know if you knew, but you know, critical thinking, let me make this clear, because this is just another way to brand good old logic, you know, as critical thinking and transform it into some sort of magical tool that will somehow help citizens. Critical thinking means that you know what a good argument is, you know what a fallacy is, you know how to build a syllogism, you know what the premises are, what the major term is, what the middle term is, basic formal logic. That is critical thinking. Logic was branded as critical thinking basically, as it is being sold as the magical tool. I mean, it is the first time in history, I think, when an instrument of reason is transformed into something magical and invested with magical powers that would help you. Now it would not. You have to read, and you have to read a lot of history and political theory in order to understand these things. Because I'm not saying this to be arrogant. It took me years to get here. You know, years of reading and of analyzing things. You don't get here just like that. So our political elites, unfortunately, are depoliticized. Are depoliticized. And the last thing that I would want to say, it is that it is unfortunate that these corporate media are attacked from the right and not from the left. And this happens also in the United States because we have a huge problem with the digital giants and the way they are deregulated. And who are the first that said that this Section 213 in their regulation has to go, that offered them neutrality, those digital platforms, when it was, I think, Ted Cruz, a Republican, okay? They were the first to attack. So you also saw even there a fight between those two right-wing camps, the conservatives fighting with the digital giants, the representatives of Donald Trump fighting with Twitter, and the left had
yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point, because exactly the same happens in Poland, unfortunately. Because if you want to look for some kind of appealing, it could, I'm not saying accurate, okay, appealing criticism of the mainstream media, unfortunately, you don't get it from the left. You get it from the right, okay, the far right, whatever you want to call them, the kind of the hardliners, okay. And why is this? Well, because they are the victims of the policies that are in place and that are facilitated, also via or through the Silicon Valley IT giants, okay, because they are being censored, because they are being demonetized, because they are being deplatformed, and so on and so forth. So for them, it's a real actual difficulty, right? And I don't necessarily feel sorry for them because their ideas are terrible. So whether they're going to be able to promote them or not is my least concern, politically speaking. But on the other hand, my problem is that their appeal also in this field of like media pluralism, media objectivism, whatever you want to call it, right? Free speech, okay. Their appeal is increasingly influential, okay. Because people, regardless of whether they know what critical thinking is, or critical theory, or critical understanding, or regardless of whether they are educated in terms of everything that you described, Maria, they feel, most of them, that something is not all right with the mainstream media. They really feel that, and you can see that in all the polls, okay, where the trust towards the mainstream media platforms is falling drastically, and it has been falling for the last, I don't know how many years, probably a decade or so, right? So people feel they are being cheated, they are being lied to, they are being manipulated, and so on and so forth. And of course, it's our task, the task of the left, to put forward an alternative and to tell the people, to build on their justifiable distrust of the media and tell them, look, these media are definitely a disinformation cartel. They are working against you. They are working for the enemies of the people, for corporations, for advertising agencies, for political parties that don't care about you, and so on and so forth. We think it should be organized differently. And I think it also has to do a lot with the notion and the question of democracy. Małgorzata spoke about that brilliantly. What's the problem of the media and why aren't they free? Like among many other things that you listed out, Małgorzata and Maria, but there's also one more important element here. The media are organized as a top-down structure. So you have this, you said it, right? 6 companies in America, where 6 CEOs, they come together with all kinds of, influential people. It could be politicians, it could be, influential business people, it could be Secret Service officers, like could be pretty much anyone that has some kind of influence or wants to have an impact on the way the public opinion is formed, right? And what happens is they agree how they're going to interpret certain things, okay, processes, things, phenomena in the world, particularly political ones. And what happens is they explain that to editors-in-chief, editorial boards, and stuff like that. And then the editors-in-chief, they have to sell it, okay, as the professional, the only possible meaningful interpretation of events to their journalists, okay? And then the journalists are selling that to their readers, okay? So it's like, you see, it's a handful of people deciding of how you should how you should interpret and how you should view, how you should see certain things, okay? And this is profoundly undemocratic, and this is profoundly, meaningless, okay, from the point of view of the role the media should have, because the media should theoretically at least, right? They should offer you some information, and they should offer you some kind of perspective, and then you should be able, using your own brain and education and all the rest of it, to make your choice. Which perspective do you like better? But no, that's not the case. Now it's like some people coming together and deciding the narrative. And this has been the case in Poland, and Małgorzata said that, and I totally agree. This has been the case in Poland for the last 30 years. Okay, that we have this quarrel now because one part of the right wing, which wasn't able to become a legitimate member of the establishment, is now striking back, okay, and with a vengeance against the weakening establishment that's been forming up for the last 30 years. And we have one right wing, okay, that's been dominating here for the last 30 years, and one right wing that's been the kind of the developing aggressive force, and they are just in a state of war, okay? And this is what we have here. And, before this tax was suggested, we haven't had anything better, okay? We haven't had anything that is worth defending. We didn't have anything that the left should stand for. We had all the reasons for the left to go against what's been happening, and we have all the reasons for the left to go against what's happening right now. Unfortunately, the left is not going against that because, and I think that definitely has to do with what Maria said, some basic courage, okay? They really think that if they support right now in this hysterical moment, the right-wing media that could potentially be victims of some kind of tax manipulation, okay, some kind of repression maybe, okay, by supporting them now, they think that they're going to be rewarded for that. Well, here's my message to you. You won't. You're just going to be kicked by both, okay, by those that are now the propaganda machine, part of the propaganda machine of the current government, as well as by those who are the propaganda machine of the opposition. Now, why is that? Well, because the left is in the way, and that's the political role of the left. That's what they should be. They should be in the way of the right wing. The problem only is that while being in the way and understanding they should be in the way, they are trying not to be in the way. And this is a kind of contradiction that I really don't see how they want to resolve. But it's not really my problem. Anyway, I want to thank you for all your insights. I think it was a very very interesting discussion, and hopefully our viewers benefited from that in terms of information, because I think they've gotten accurate information from Małgorzata on the ground in Poland, and some accurate comments from all of us here. So before we say goodbye, any closing remarks from any of you?
We should have workers' co-ops also in journalism. I think is very important. Besides the fact that we have to rely on our readers to directly finance us, we also have to have a horizontal organization in order to give journalists a voice.
Right, Małgorzata, you?
Well, my closing remark would be just to think before you join in any protest of a corporate media. Just think what kind of content this corporate media was feeding us with. And when they are talking about the death of political debate, let us remember in what kind of political debate they offered at the very beginning in Poland, before the last parliamentary elections, and just after these elections, when the left-wing social democratic members of parliament reappeared, and they tried to show their presence with a little bit more courageous moves. Well, from these media that are now trying to stand as defenders of free speech, we heard that there are Bolsheviks in Polish parliament, that communism is approaching, perhaps, that their proposals are inaccurate, they are irresponsible, and well, what is the vision of this corporate media? That we need to remove the extreme right-wingers from power. And well, if you want to have, my appeal would be then, you want you want to have a debate, you want to have free speech, then be part of it, then fund your alternative media, or participate in a media collective if you feel that you have a talent for that. But really don't count on the big companies that want to gain profit and not to produce any quality debate for everybody.
Right. Thank you so much. And I think it's a great message. Before you join a protest, think, whom are you actually supporting? Thank you so much again, Maria and Malgorzata. I want to wish our viewers all the very best. Stay healthy and keep fighting. We're going to be back.
Also support us on Patreon, because we need your support.
That's true. Yeah, please go to our Patreon. Go to our Patreon account. It's patreon.com/thebarricade, and subscribe in order to have an independent left-wing Eastern European media. Stay healthy. Keep fighting.